Good afternoon, and welcome to the IFBTA Supplier Point of View panel. And today we're featuring IFBTA industry partner members Hughes, IBM, and Panasonic. But first, let me introduce myself and the IFBTA to you. I'm Rob Grimes, the CEO of the IFBTA. The IFBTA, or International Food and Beverage Technology Association, is a not-for-profit trade association that's focused on food and beverage technology. We welcome all operators and suppliers to the table. Everyone has an equal seat at the table. And our main functions are to provide education, promote technology, and obviously do networking within the industry on a global basis. We have a global reach that includes many local and regional chapters, including some outside the United States. We also have a virtual chapter, and then we do events at different industry major events, which we hope to do again soon. Hopefully in the first half of next year, we'll restart the events in person, but if not, we continue to have gatherings and other events such as this online. We also have a certification program that helps to identify all the different technologies that we talk about on a very impartial basis. It gives a good general education, and we would urge you to take the certification program, and certainly all members of the IFBTA are welcome to take that as well. And then lastly, we have industry partnerships and support with many other trade associations, states, other industry events, media, and then of course our partners. But before we get started, let me go through a couple of housekeeping items. We would ask that you submit your questions through the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. Some of you have already submitted questions as you registered for this event. If you submit on the Q&A tab, we would ask that you would specify if your question is for a specific speaker or if it's for the whole panel. And we ask you to go ahead and stay away from things that regard sales, pricing, political discussions, disparaging remarks, and things like that. Your microphones are muted, so if you need to chat with the panel or the organizers, please go ahead and use the chat function. But again, we ask you to use Q&A to submit questions that you would like to be discussed during the Q&A session that we will have today. And of course, after the call, the recording is available on ifbta.org, social media, and all of our partner websites. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panel today. And panelists, if you would turn on your speakers and your microphones and your video, that would be great. So great. So today we're going to start out and have a discussion, but these panels have been very well selected, so we have a well-rounded group. And I think you're going to understand as we go through the questions today and as we have our discussion that each one of our panelists really bring a different perspective. Not only perspectives that come from the food and beverage industry, but perspectives that come from other industries. And they may overlap in a couple of areas, but really they don't. And I think you're going to enjoy the conversation we have today. So Eric with Panasonic. So Eric, why don't you go ahead and give us an overview of your background, Panasonic, and then we'll go over to Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and it's really great to be here with you and everybody today. So a bit about myself and Panasonic. I've been with the company now for about 18 months, but I've spent a long career working for software technology companies in and around supply chain, retail, consumer goods, food service, and the like. And, you know, Panasonic's been serving the hospitality industry with a variety of solutions for probably, well, really since the late 70s. And if you think about where we are today, our offering spans, it goes under the brand name of ClearConnect, and it's really about all of the technologies that an operator would need to successfully run their business, whether it be in the drive-through, inside the restaurant, and we'll talk as we go through the discussion today about the various solutions that we're seeing in the way they interact with customers, facilitating pickup and delivery, but it's hardware, software, and all of the installation and break-fix services that operators need to run a successful business. So I'll kind of leave it high level for now. I'm sure we'll get into some of the details of what we're seeing in the market as we go through the discussion.
You will bet we will get into the details. So Tim, why don't we turn it over to you with Hughes?
Hi, my name is Tim Tang, and thank you very much for having me. My role at Hughes is to basically look at the digital transformation that's taking place across a lot of different industries. I focus on the restaurant industry. I look at retail, look at C-store, banking and finance. what I find is that when it comes to digital transformation, we need more use cases. We need the opportunity to see what's working and what's not working. And I find that by looking at across different industries, there's a lot of cross-pollination. A lot of the similar ideas and similar challenges of customer engagement, customer experience, employee engagement are very consistent across the board. And so I try to take best practices across and apply them in an appropriate fashion. I've been with Hughes for 26 years now. Hughes is a managed service provider. We try to make technology, have a whole portfolio of broadband, cybersecurity, Wi-Fi, digital media, menu board type of solutions. We try to make technology a little bit easier for the operator.
Great. And also joining us is Jason Kelly with IBM. So Jason, if you would unmute. There you go. If you'd give us an introduction of your background and also of IBM's interest in the food service industry, that'd be great.
Certainly. Well, thanks for that. And past technical difficulties, here I am and glad to be here. My name's Jason Kelly. For the team listening in, I am the Global General Manager for IBM's blockchain business unit. And we, as a 109-year-old startup of IBM, tend to work with most of the major players here, those that are joining me on the panel as well. And we are very excited about the work we've been doing in food and beverage and hospitality as a whole, because what we have found is that underlying what the end user ultimately consumes, and those consumers being all of us, is really exchanges of data of what is that we're going to consume, where did it come from, is it safe, is it the right value? Are we going to pay the right price because of that supply chain, or as we like to say it, value chain? So the fact that there are multiple exchanges happening from source to consumption, and there's a lot of data being exchanged in those handshakes, we see opportunity to return value to that value chain so that we all have a better consumer experience at the end. So looking forward to today's discussion.
Great. Thank you, Jason. So let's go ahead and just have a chat on some things going on in the industry. And again, as a reminder to our audience, if you want to submit a question, please do it through the Q&A tab. And then with about 10 minutes left in the session, we're going to switch over to the questions that were sent to us in advance and also those that you asked during this. You know, we're going to talk about the positive things and opportunities going forward. But clearly our industry has had a lot of challenges, and each of you approach it from different perspectives. So what changes have you seen in the industry given COVID that have occurred in the last, 6 to 9 months?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we've seen a number of changes. For when COVID first hit, obviously there was a dearth of activity. Everybody was just trying to figure out what was going on, and they needed to take a bit of time to figure out how they were going to respond and how consumers were going to respond. And so we've seen, we primarily focus on and work with operators in the quick serve restaurant, fast casual, and kind of hospitality segment. And, in a lot of cases, dining rooms were closed for a long time. So some of the things that we saw were people rethinking their business models, rethinking how they were going to stay in business without open dining rooms. A lot of focus, even more focus rather, shifted to how to optimize the drive-through, how to optimize for pickup and delivery. Obviously, contactless became a very hot word and hot topic in the industry, and companies are still trying to figure out the best way to provide even more, customer service options that don't require contact with an individual. So, without getting into all the specific technologies, we really saw just a shift in focus from the dining room to the drive-through to pickup and delivery and to contactless offerings. So that's our perspective on what we've seen in the market.
When it comes to COVID-19, I think what was really interesting is that it really served as a litmus test, I think, for the industry. We got to see kind of, on one hand, a base of customers who needed help. It was devastating, the impact of COVID in terms of just overnight, customer traffic dried up, and they were struggling to compensate and basically find new ways of engaging. At the same time, And so for those customers, Hughes had to kind of adjust. We had to come up with offerings to kind of delay payments and kind of work with them to kind of help them navigate a very difficult time in the industry. But at the same time, there was another side of the industry that just accelerated dramatically their technology plans. And they were positioned well, they had the resources, and we saw them push forward with just a whole litany of digital engagements from mobile, from Wi-Fi, from curbside, from third-party integrations and the like. And that was exciting to see too as well. It was outstanding to see how when the market conditions demanded it, there were those who were able to kind of respond and actually execute and implement. And it's amazing what they were able to do in a matter of weeks, what would ordinarily take years.
Jason?
Yeah, I think that I'll echo that last thought, what Tim said, this thought of speed, the sense of urgency came to the forefront. And that sense of urgency, as Eric called out as well, was one that said, look, we have to run differently to respond quickly. And it's this thought of a value chain. Often it's been, as I said, this supply chain. We found out that what we all thought was flexible is actually very, very brittle. And in that, there's a common demand now that people understand differently is trust. Trust and transparency. Trust that I can get what I want and what I get is what it is, whether it be PPE or is this food safe, or as we look forward, is it the right vaccine and will it do what I want it to do, and will I be notified to come back 20 days later if I need to? So this thought of visibility and trust has really come to the forefront so that we as sometimes technologists don't have to answer the question such as, what does that B word mean? Like, can you explain the technology? Instead, what we've had is a lot of people saying, okay, what's the outcome? Can I now see with trust and transparency? And can I do it very quickly? Those are very basic outcomes that we've seen from an unfortunate situation that now has brought those things to the forefront.
Well, there's two sides to this particular question. There's the operator side and there's also the supplier side. And a number of you have also made reference to things that your companies may have done different. So I'd sort of like to put you on the spot, for a second here, that, okay, we recognize that the operators had to move very quickly and maybe they changed their thinking and maybe they accelerated things. But how does a supplier change, or maybe you had something in that toolkit because all three of your companies work in many other places. Maybe you had some way to adapt. And a great example that comes up all the time on the operator side is those guys who made beers and brewery, started making sanitizer, right? So how did you guys, actually change and adapt and pull something out of the toolkit that was now applicable?
So Rob, I'll jump in right off the bat because I get to use that same example of here is a typical supplier that was doing beer. Now it's hand sanitizer. And you think of that, they are now in a hybrid business, alcohol for different reasons, in a sense. And they are stepping into an ecosystem, supplying something that they typically don't supply. So it's a new ecosystem of players. And let's just assume they're going to supply a hospital. That hospital says, I'm going to buy 10,000 gallons of that stuff. Next thing you know, the hospital has way too much hand sanitizer. Now they're not just a consumer, now they're a supplier to the other hospitals that they need to offload or want to offload this off to. So now they have a hybrid buyer-supplier role. They're both now in hybrid ecosystems. We quickly said, how do we make these entities meet up with trust? And so we did that in what we call something called Rapid Supplier Connect, which was a way to, if you think of a glorified, trusted matchmaking service in supply, that's what we were able to pull.
And I would point out that the idea of, so we have traditional suppliers in the industry and traditional supply chain routes. This is actually bringing together one very quickly that is not traditional to the industry. And therefore that actually created a solution to it. Now, Tim, similarly, you work in a lot of different industries and you guys do a lot of different things with the networks and things. I'm sure the demand went up as a managed service provider, data security and things. What were you able to pull out of the toolkit to really help to meet the needs that maybe you weren't expecting before?
Well, when you think about the restaurant industry, what's kind of interesting there's a whole spectrum of, in terms of solution portfolios that the industry uses. And what's interesting though is that if I were to characterize the industry as a whole, it tends to tilt toward the minimalist perspective. It tends not to want to spend or operate. I mean, every dollar counts, and there's a lot of enormous pressure in terms of food costs, labor costs, and the like. And so when it comes to restaurant infrastructure, the restaurant tends to be under-teched and under-fulfilled. And so what was intriguing about COVID-19, though, is that you had a whole massive digital pivot in order to engage with the consumer. They went mobile, they went curbside, and they had suddenly a complete dependency on technology in order to engage with their consumer. And so what it exposed was basically a lot of underlying weaknesses in the restaurant infrastructure. There was insufficient bandwidth. Wi-Fi coverage was remarkable. A lot of restaurants reported, and because even inside the restaurant they were having challenges, never mind curbside and getting to the parking lot. That was a whole kind of another animal altogether. So what we saw kind of in the restaurant industry over these past months is a whole gravitation, a whole adoption of embracing a wider portion of the technology portfolio.
But Tim, didn't they already have the basic building blocks in place? I mean, if we were 10 years ago, we'd be sitting around talking about whether you're going to have wireless, right? And by the way, whether your pipe was big enough to come in. Now, maybe it wasn't big enough for the new demand, but at least it was there, right? So didn't they already have the basic building blocks on it, and then you were able to, help them to go from there to what they needed?
Yeah, you would think, right? The basic building blocks are there, yet at the same point, there are problems, right? Just like you experience at home, where the infrastructure works great until all your kids get on Zoom at the same time, and suddenly you can't even do simple things that would ordinarily be easy. And you think about how much the restaurant had to suddenly embrace in a very short amount of time. They were using QR codes for their menus. They were doing, and Wi-Fi became the full basis for their digital engagement. And so the challenge there is that when you look at it, was it connected? Yes. Did it work? Was it a superior customer experience? Was it the kind of impressive experience that they were looking to provide to their consumers? I would suggest in many cases it was not. 3-second transactions turned into 30-second or more. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes the technology, the QR code, it did work, it didn't work. These kinds of inconsistencies were the gaps, if you will, in the restaurant infrastructure.
So maybe they weren't as prepared as they needed to be, in that particular situation. And because of the work that you do in other industries that use a lot more, you were able to take those learnings and bring them forward. Eric, similarly to you now, Panasonic's a really big company that makes everything, I think, from air conditioners to kitchen stuff to you name it, right? Batteries for cars. So, what was in that portfolio that all of a sudden became pop hot, which might not have been before?
Yeah, it's really interesting. We are a very diversified manufacturer. In the U.S., it's primarily business to business. We don't do too much consumer business in the U.S. anymore. But you're right, COVID-19 didn't just depress business across the board. Some areas of the business where we were selling solutions to first responders or logistics companies, because everybody's buying things online, those business segments started to go through the roof. And then there were others like avionics. We all know what happened with aviation with COVID-19 and travel. Those businesses were depressed. So, if we look in the across the company and our very diverse portfolio, it was really a mixed bag. We look in the food service area, it was almost overnight, like somebody flipped a switch, and the food service companies started to look at solutions like optimize. There was always a focus on drive-through, but optimizing that drive-through experience, getting as many cars through that drive-through as they could during rush hour in particular, became very, very, very hot. Food lockers to facilitate both contactless commerce as well as pickup and delivery, which again has accelerated during COVID-19. One of the hottest solutions going right now. I mean, and overnight it was like somebody flipped a switch, and that to Jason's point earlier, you got to rethink your supply chain at that point. You've got to find in some cases new suppliers. You've got to be able to optimize the supply chains that you already have in order to in a really short-term switch from one solution to another, you've got to rethink how you're going to meet that demand. So it created some challenges, but I think one of the things that we saw that everybody was, we were sort of all impressed with ourselves, how quickly you could convert to working virtually and be efficient at it. And I think that's not actually going to ever go away. So we saw a lot of change in the business, but again, it wasn't just a depression. It was really a mixed bag across the business.
Since you just brought up that last one there, Tim, I know you guys, one of the things that you do a lot of work in is education and providing platforms for that. beyond the bandwidth and things. And, you know, what were the solutions, or what are the, not necessarily your solutions, but what are the challenges that the changing workforce, of which many might say are not going to come back to the same jobs, you know, but maybe working at home at the corporate headquarters and things like that, you know, where were you seeing the changes in the workforce being impacted now and going forward?
Well, when you think about the restaurant industry right now, you've got a whole order of magnitude now more complexity in terms of the operational burdens and the overheads that's encountered, right? And so, and there's an order of magnitude more communication out to the field. And I think a lot of across all industries, retail, restaurant, banking, and finance, it was email after email. Employees, you need to do this. Employees, you need to do that. And it was too much information. And by far, you saw a pivot to video. Video was a lot quicker, a lot shorter, a lot more to the point, and actually, to just make one adjustment there, from a Hughes perspective, we do have a whole portfolio of employee engagement. And so where we saw a lot of our business kind of shift a little bit on the managed network side, there was a big spike in terms of employee engagement and looking at how to get more live, real-time communications out to the field for those frontline workers.
So Jason, you mentioned the word trust quite a bit. And obviously, you know, the concept of trust and knowing and food safety, you know, is a huge area. Even more so, well, actually food and employee safety and guest safety is a huge area, you know, going forward. Is the consumer's expectation now forever changed in what they expect to be able to know about the food, where it comes from, the employees, and how things are being handled? You know, has it changed, and is it going to stay that way, you know, when this is hopefully over?
Absolutely. I think all of us here could smile and say yes to that, because we look at people out of our eyes when we hear a sneeze or a cough these days, because it causes us to think differently. As those things don't change. I think Eric said, you know, once that it's in our head, it's there. And so just transfer that, our health, to what we do every day is we put food in our bodies. And you can go back and as you know, Rob, we started with, we said, well, we're going to start with supply chain and we're going to start with food. That was when we thought about trust and what we're doing. That goes years back, but now people are saying, wait a second, what about the workers as well? The service workers that are preparing my food? How do I know that they're healthy? How do I know that I can trust everyone in the restaurant around me? So the food, yes, has always been there. Is it heightened? Yes. But now we see a lot more concern, and we're hearing this demand now, is how can I make sure that the people coming into my restaurant or to my hotel or on my cruise ship or in the theater, how do I know that they're healthy? And how do I create a credential that allows us to know with trust and transparency that they're okay? And it's for this current situation. And I think that when you talk about what's going to be expected going forward, Rob, I think that expectation of trust and transparency for all of us is going to be heightened for whatever the next thing is.
You know, the interesting thing about data, you know, out there is that the data is only going to be more available. The customers are going to be more connected. I don't think they're going to go back the way they were. They want to be connected now. And so even if they're going into a full service or a fine dining, I think they're going to be connected, whether it's looking up, you know, what they're ordering, where it's sourced from, whether it's the safety, whether it's watching what goes on in the kitchen. You know, they're clearly going to be connected. Now that creates, to Tim's point, not only a lot more bandwidth issues here, but it creates a security issue. So how do you create trust in, this is to anybody, and Eric, you guys process a lot of transactions from a lot of different places. How do you actually create that trust in data, given all this stuff now flying around? And the good news is, we're no longer really talking about unit-based systems, you know, premise-based systems. So, but we got a trust issue there too. So Eric, what do you?
Yeah, it's interesting. And, you know, building on a little bit of what Jason said, you know, in addition to trust in data, you've got to trust that the people you're interacting with are, you know, healthy, that they're safe. One of the things that we've seen a spike in interest in is employee and customer safety oriented solutions. things that leverage everything from video analytics to biometrics. I mean, you know, there's a lot of legislation on around the country in various stages about biometrics and potential limitations on that. It's amazing how consumers will make the trade-off in favor of their own health and safety and be willing to, you know, engage with a system that utilizes facial recognition or other biometric data. You know, they're more willing to trust, back to your word, when there's something in it for them that is sort of the most important thing, right? Is the health and well-being and safety of us as consumers. Employees, customers for these businesses. We're just seeing a shift in the mindset of what people are willing to engage with in terms of technologies.
Just to cue on something you just said, Eric, you're absolutely right. You know, we've always said that people are willing to give away a lot of information, do a lot of things if they're getting something back, a better price or whatever, maybe less service, you know, and I don't think things get reversed over time. But you're talking about facial recognition. You know, I think back to about a year or two ago, some restaurants were testing a link with a camera at the door to do your face, you know, as you connected to your Facebook profile. And boy, that got shut down pretty quick. Now the concept, I think, going forward of having facial recognition to take your temperature and everything else, you know, that's out there, like they did in Asia when they had the flu over there, you know, SARS a number of years ago, totally accepted.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
One thing I would add to this is that, you know, as we think through this, it'll be very interesting to see the level of adoption, because it was kind of waning in China. It seemed to be that tipping point where, hey, it was too much to do the facial payments. And now as we see COVID come back, I wonder, it'll be interesting to see if there gets renewed momentum. Just to kind of follow up on the other thing about trust as it relates to, if I could make just one commentary about the restaurant industry at large. For so much of the restaurant industry, it is underpowered from a cybersecurity perspective. So many restaurateurs are not even PCI compliant, and they're failing in some very basic fundamental areas. And so as we look at this COVID-19 world where, you know, the cyber criminal activity has spiked because everyone's working from home, it has increased the sensitivities, if you will, and the threat exposure for the restaurant industry. It's much easier now to attack not only employees at home, but restaurants themselves too as well, and much more profitable too as well. And so the caution for the restaurant industry is to review and reconsider your cybersecurity posture.
So leave it to Tim to go ahead and bring up, you know, just another thing we ought to be thinking about. So, you know, cost. You know, people didn't want to invest in infrastructure. They didn't want to invest in things like security, especially if you had franchisees. I think the corporate guys understood that because they didn't want to get a breach, right? That was out there. But now everybody's focused on it. And it seems like the IT budgets for things they now need to have, like say, security and infrastructure, have changed because people realize they wouldn't be operating right now. Do you guys all see do you all see the same thing, Jason? You know, has the IT budget and people's willingness, and Tim, by the way, did start it in his introduction where he talked about the speed of things coming out much faster.
Well, I think that you've helped set this up in this thought of it's not IT necessarily. It's that what used to be IT budget is now going across the business as just the business's budget, the business success, the business continuity, sustainability. These words now have new meaning. Sustainability used to mean food waste. Are we composting? Sustainability now means, can I keep the business sustainable? So we definitely are seeing, you know, people look at technology differently. We're seeing technology discussions now be business discussions where we go like, wait a second. And I think this has come out in your conversation. It's not that the technology wasn't there. We just hadn't pulled it forward. As Tim mentioned, yeah, sure, there were some gaps and things weren't as satisfactory, but we really, as a group, you think about, we had things on the shelf. People, all of us, our companies, as well as the restaurants, they pulled things and pulled them in, made it happen very quickly. So what do we see changing as a result, Rob, is that the conversations are now very interlocked between business and technology. It's no longer, do I just buy a different router? It's well, why and how fast and how's that going to increase my throughput of people, you know,
because the business understands they need it.
You got it. It's now changed the type of conversations we're having. People don't want to know. They don't say, as I said, explain blockchain to me. No, they don't care about how, don't explain it to me. Just tell me what I'm going to get out of it.
Right. Hey, Eric, I mean, you must have a similar
Oh,
experience.
absolutely agree. 100%. You know, it's not about what technology can we invest in. It's how do I get 20 more cars through the drive-through at lunch rush? And that means, you know, yeah, I've got to invest in technology. I've got to have, you know, tablets, for ruggedized tablets for my people who are out there taking orders. I have to have, you know, one of the things we saw, and I was talking to Tim about this the other day. Somebody wanted to optimize their drive-through. We had all the technology there, but the Wi-Fi service wasn't powerful enough to extend out into the parking lot, and they had never thought about that. So, but again, the discussion isn't. It is about how do I increase revenue by through the drive-through? How do I decrease labor costs by putting lockers in so I don't have to have people there just to facilitate pickup and delivery? It's a business discussion. It's not an IT discussion. The IT is the enabler. It's not the, you know, it's outcome based, as I think my co-panelists talked about earlier.
I think a lot
it's interesting to kind of think about how the business model of the restaurant industry has changed, right? You have significantly increases in terms of the operational overhead because of the COVID-19 practices, the best practices, and health and safety measures. And then you have an order of magnitude fewer customers to work with. So I've got escalating costs and fewer customers to engage with. And it's in this kind of environment that we operators need to turn a profit. And the question is, how do you get that kind of leverage so that you can, with a smaller customer base and higher operational costs, still be in a survival kind of, a restaurant can still survive and sustain itself. And what we see in a lot of the restaurants is that there is a kind of a U-shaped chart here. On one end, you have those who are in survival mode and every dollar counts and they're just trying to keep the doors open. In the middle, there's not very many people in the middle. And then on the other end, there are those who do have the budgets and do have the ability to execute even in this kind of pandemic environment.
But what it has done, and we're going to shift over to questions from our audience. So if you have any questions you would like to send in, please go ahead and do it now. But we are going to go to the questions that we've been asked. But what it does say to us is also that whereas a lot of people looked to doing a lot of custom solutions in the past, they were forced because of speed to find things either in our industry or other industries. They also may have accelerated some projects during this and gotten them done, check the box, you know, which so they can move on. But we are hearing a lot of people are shifting their budgets for next year to being more digital oriented budgets, you know, from some of the other pieces that are there. We got a question from somebody, I guess, in the hotel business who wants to know what technology should they consider in areas of new hotel development, especially as it relates to the contactless and self-service. I would suppose we could add in there maybe the micro markets and things. And by the way, I will point out that I was on a call with some hotel guys once who said, we're trying to figure out what to do to reopen, but we never knew that there was actually a lock on the front door of a hotel because it was never closed and they had to figure out how to unlock it. So, but anyway, in the hotel business, micro markets, you know, being used in airports and things. Tim or Eric, you want to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think a few things that we're seeing in those kinds of businesses, whether hospitality that's not necessarily restaurant focused, a lot of interest in reducing interaction with front desk staff. So you get into a lot of interest that we're seeing in kiosks, again, that leverage contactless technologies. We're seeing, and that's just not just kiosks, say for check into a hotel, but for theme park admission, but also kiosks for vending, you know, specialty things for pizza or coffee or other things of that nature are very, very popular. We're seeing a lot of concepts come up that are seeing a lot of volume come through on those types of technologies.
Kiosks were going to be dead in restaurants.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interest has shifted. They're not dead, but the interest has shifted to other applications for those.
In hospitality, I would also add that because of just the sheer volume of space that's involved, I'm seeing a lot of, particularly internationally, a lot of interest in using a computer vision to kind of gauge where are the guests spending their time and what areas of the hotel need to be cleaned, or how do I make sure that people are honoring the social distancing policies and the like. And so there's a lot of things that technology can bring to the table when we have, you know, a higher cost, a higher burdensome operational type environment to kind of to be smarter about using and applying the limited resources that we have.
And they're likely to also be doing a lot more in contactless as well, because you got the room, the doors, and everything else that's there as well. Jason, you know, I'm going to give you this one as well, because it seems that hotels are a little bit different than you think about traditional food and beverage, where they may have a set menu, set things. You know, once they start going into catering or they have room service or different volume levels and occupancies, which are much different than saying 25% of your restaurant, right?
Right.
You know, what are you seeing there that in that particular space or some of the other spaces, you know, that they need to focus on?
Well, it's interesting that you call that out. Different platforms, different platform starts to pull together everything from check-in to loyalty to room service. You start to say, look, if I'm going to walk through the door, you talk about kiosk. If I go through my friend Karen, CEO at Clear, talking about biometrics, you can go through airports here in the US and your pupils define who you are. And if I have that on a platform, say in my phone, and of course we would say underline with some platform of trust and transparency, I won't bring up the B word, that then as you walk in, why can't I use that same check with my pupils to get into the hotel room? And why can't I use that same reservation as I got in the car from the airport that walked me through the door of the hotel, that allowed me to have that same capability on the same platform? So you see where that starts to come together, is that this seamless capability really becomes a platform that everyone builds on. Back to this thought that technology was out there. Well, if it's in the cloud, I don't have to buy new infrastructure. I can look across at one of Eric's food lockers that's sitting over there as I walk through the hotel, and all of a sudden I can use those airplane loyalty points I just earned flying there to click, and I'm going to open the food locker, grab a sandwich as I walk up to my room. So that's what people are looking. We're hearing that more often than not. Can I tie my car ride to the plane ride, to the check-in, to the cruise ship, to the theater? You get it. So
I think that the piece that you're bringing up here is that there are actually a number of the things that you've mentioned are things, in fact, could apply to the restaurant industry at some point. Check-in, for sure. Optimization of yield management, certainly could with limited space, which also might have yield management pricing increases. I could see that one coming. But there's a lot of things that you've talked about, the check-in, the host, that you could tie to that. Let's switch questions a little bit. Because we've been talking about some of the things, and Jason, you just brought them up about biometrics and facial recognition. What are the security implications of capturing biometric attributes? And maybe the customers aren't going to care anymore, and maybe there aren't going to be regulations on this anymore. But what are the security things that we need to be thinking about here, and the implication of it, and privacy implications, going forward?
Great point.
And can the industry secure it?
So good question. So we believe in our company, the data, whoever created it owns the data. So if it's about me, I own it as an individual. If it's an entity that created it, they own the data.
Yep.
Oh, may have lost him.
Yep. I feel like, well, one of you guys, why don't you go ahead and take that?
I think one of the things that you have to also be very sensitive to when it comes to biometrics is the new privacy laws. GDPR started within Europe with GDPR, now California with CCPA, the consumer.
Because the ethics around it and the bias that it could support. So
we lost you there for a little bit. So Tim was guessing at what you were going to say and was bringing it up. But Tim, why don't you go ahead and finish the thought there?
Yeah. So one of the key things when it comes to the biometric data is thinking about how the privacy regulations have emerged now. The California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA, is now enforced, and it has all kinds of implications now when a customer says, hey, I want you to forget me. And if you've got all this biometric data, it's now on the for the restaurateur and the retailers to make sure that they have cleaned out all of their records of any kind of customer data that they may have. So it's really fascinating how we're able to achieve another level of convenience for our customers, but it's also another level of obligation now, particularly given the sensitivities in the marketplace.
Great. Eric, we had a question that came in about ghost kitchens. I'm going to expand a little bit and address it to you. But you've been talking about lockers, which are alternate delivery places as well. It may not actually be located at the unit. It could be somewhere else, like Amazon's been putting in 7-Eleven, right? So, but if you have ghost kitchens and things, that's going to require a different kind of technology out there, both for the food side of it. It's also, Jason, going to require a different type of technology as it relates to, you know, the whole supply chain and also trust of food that's going to a centralized place. But Eric, you know, what do you think about how the ghost kitchens are going to go ahead and change things?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the growth in ghost kitchen is probably a trend we should have noted earlier, but since, you know, they were already on the radar, but since COVID-19 hit and pickup and delivery has accelerated even more. I mean, these are operations that are designed to optimize the pickup and delivery experience, whether it be for a consumer or for a delivery service, and their technology requirements are different. I mean, you need a different set of solutions to facilitate that kind of business. And we're seeing a lot of interest from a variety of ghost kitchen operators in all of the things that we've been talking about. You need to, in that environment, you need to make sure that you're integrated with all the delivery services. So that creates a challenge because there are a bunch of those out there, and you need to be able to take data from those and communicate with consumers. But that reinforces the need for some of the things that we've been talking about. Obviously, drive-through doesn't become important there, but you know, the ability to have a space set up for people to come and pick up food without ever interacting with a human becomes paramount.
That's right. And also, Jason, you know, just on that particular point, it creates a number of challenges. You can operate your own ghost kitchens, you know, for a number of different things, but also you have the consolidated kitchens, you know, that are there, which create a whole nightmare of connected points, right. You know, and the trust not only between the person who's producing, the person who's supplying, but also the one who's delivering and taking it out.
Right. And this thought of aligning that trust and sharing it by what typically would be silos is a challenge. As you're connecting these entities and sharing that, the only way that you have trust is through transparency in most cases, so that you know who has done what. And as I got cut off earlier, the thought was, if you create the data, you own the data, meaning that's who should own it, the creator. So it's around data privacy. And so if I'm an individual, when I walk into a restaurant, yes, I want you to know my preference, that this is my favorite type of coffee that I order, but only if I want you to know that. So those types of permissions and having a permission type of platform is exactly what's needed.
Right. Jason, you highlight one of the big stumbling blocks right now that's facing the industry, right? Because the ones who are creating the data right now, in many cases, are the third-party delivery guys, and it's not the restaurateurs. And so it's shocking to find that we are in a season or in an era where the restaurateurs, the ones who are serving the customer, actually don't have rights to the data of their end user. And
but what goes around comes around, because the hotel industry, the airline industry, all went through that when people started taking bookings that weren't themselves and they brought it back in. So we can follow that. So just one last question for you guys. And Tim, I'm actually going to start with you, because you really see a lot of different parts of the world, you know, that are out there. You know, what is the most exciting thing that you just have seen somebody handle, perhaps a technology enabled, maybe in retail, hospitality, or food service, that you think is going to impact, or the food service industry should be thinking about going forward?
Oh, that's easy to answer. When I look at the restaurant industry, I would say that one of the biggest stumbling blocks right now facing the restaurant industry is the lack of the inability to integrate. It's the inability to put together and stitch together digital experiences on behalf of their customers, because there's just so much proprietary integration activity that needs to take place. And so one of the things that I'm very keen on, and I see this, I guess, across industries too as well. It's last year with the C-store industry and all the API work that's been taking place, and now this year in the restaurant industry. I think the emergence of standard APIs in this industry has the opportunity to transform everything. For the first time, as these APIs get market share and get adoption and get traction, I think for the first time, we're finally going to be able to see the ability to really accelerate the technology tech stack platforms for the restaurateurs, drive down the cost of technology, and expand its portfolio and capability and its application of use.
Great. Jason, the one thing you want to leave us with that you've seen going on that you think is going to be a big impact?
Well, I'll bridge off of Tim so we stay consistent on point here. Common thread is integration across the value chain. And as we integrate that, we infuse trust and transparency into that, making sure that the end consumer has trust. And as we do that, shrink that value chain so that we return value to it, and we can all see from end to end greater outcomes. Great.
So Eric, with that, I'm going to trust that you can bring us home and give us your final thoughts, since you really work down at the unit level with a lot of different people.
Absolutely. I'll stay on the same theme. And, as we've talked about all these new technologies, new ways to service customers within the restaurant, I think we're going to see the adoption of a single common platform that's going to drive all of those experiences. Like most, manufacturers, consumer goods companies and the like who have adopted ERP systems over the years to be their single sort of source of data, you're going to have a single source of the truth within the restaurant that's going to be able to drive it, whether it's a digital menu board, a pickup and delivery, drive-through, or anything else. I think that common platform, which does certainly involve integration, is going to be critical going forward.
A single source of data that probably is accessible to the restaurant, but probably does not reside.
May not reside there, but that's right. It'll drive everything.
Very good. Well, listen, I want to thank all of our panelists today for giving your perspectives. I'm sure that our audience can tell that there's so many different subjects here that we could talk about here, and you guys are each coming from it from a different part, but we really do appreciate it. There were some questions sent to us that we were not able to get to, and we will go ahead and try to follow up after this as well. If you want to contact any of our panelists today, their email information is here. And again, I would remind you that you can go to ifbta.org, our partner websites, and on social media, and you can go ahead and share this session as well, and also get in contact not only with your peers, but also those who supply the industry and those who operate in the industry on both sides. So again, thank you very much to our panel. And I'm Rob Grimes with the IFBTA, and thank you for joining us today.